Hey, this is TimmyG back with another Logic Pro video. In this video, I'm going to break down my track Inner Fire off my new Go Away EP, which is out now. Let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is go over the arrangement of this track. So I titled it up here, so we see that we have the intro, verse 1/build up, the first drop, and then the post drop from that first drop. And then I kind of repeat the same theme from the intro that builds into the second verse/build up. And then we go to drop 2, and then after drop 2, there's a very short outro, and then it's over. There's no real right or wrong way to set up your arrangement for a dubstep track. I try to keep all my tracks under 4 minutes, and if you can see right here, the very end, we're about 3.5 minutes, which I think is good for what I'm trying to do, especially for this EP. I don't want it to be too long. And for songs to end up in playlists and all sorts of stuff like that, we want it to be a reasonable length. But I also love the drop 1 and drop 2 because it allows me to do other stuff, which we'll see later in this video. Anyway, the first section I'm going to talk about is the intro. So you can kind of see how I have my track organized, and I love that Logic finally allowed us to have our track stacks within track stacks, because that has really helped my organization with all my projects moving forward. That happened about a year ago. But anyway, let's get into the introduction. So I have my intro stuff here, and we can see the first instrument that I have is this. It's called WTF Trap. I believe this is a sample from Sculpture. The way I organize this, I hide all my tracks. So this is the hidden track here. So if I go here, we might have some of my Sculpture things, but either way, this is a Sculpture sample that I bounced out. And that, if you see, this is actually, we're starting a little bit before the grid line, and I think that's why I bounced it out, so we could get that perfectly lined up. So I have this little noise, and then I have this bass that filters in, and I'm going to hit A for automation here, and we can see that this is a frequency of, I believe, this EQ. Maybe not that EQ. Oh no, the single EQ. Here we go. The single EQ, which is a high cut EQ. We can see that this is slowly increasing. And that's kind of a nice way to smoothly introduce this element in here. And then at bar 9, we have the organ synth. Same idea. This is a filter in here that is bringing that organ synth in. And then one thing that I really love about this track is this tiny little, I'm going to turn automation off, this tiny little rain harp. And by the way, this Crush Pulse Bass, I'm pretty sure was a stock plugin that I just maybe messed around with. This organ synth, I've had it. I use the note repeater in the retro synth, basically to use a lot of octaves. So here's what that sounds like. I'll use Command K for musical typing. Let's move this over so we can get... So just that, it's super quiet right now. But the rain harp that I'm talking about, this is just a very basic Sculpture setting. I'm pretty sure it's a preset, but... So, by the way, this key is in E flat. It's in kind of an E flat Middle Eastern scale, so... Oh, well, I'm not trying to record anything. So right here, so this little theme. If you notice, if you've listened to the track before, we're actually going to see that theme. That's kind of how the drop starts, but with a much more intense dubstep bass. So this is kind of a little bit of a foreshadow, which I was pretty happy with. So all that together, as we're introducing this... builds into the verse, which is much more intense. Okay. Now, on top of the intro, I have this folder called BRN. So BRN is something that I've been using for a while. It stands for boomers, risers, and noise. So during that intro part, we have all of this stuff. So right here, I'll start with that because that's how the track starts. I'm pretty sure I just got this from the Apple Loops. And I use it throughout the entire track, as you can see. And then the Apple Loops have a lot of boomers, so this is what a boomer sounds like. All right, this boomer's not really cooperating right now. So anyway, I don't know why this boomer's not working, but this boomer is working. So it has that, and if you notice, I have the volume down here. Sometimes I'll have the boomers with a sub-bass glide, but anyway, that boomer, I used boomers a lot in some of my earlier music that I made. Now I kind of use them sparingly. This white noise, all I've done is kind of automated a cutoff of a white noise and bounce this as an audio file, so I just save this. It's just quicker. I use that in a lot of my tracks that I'm trying to get the similar effect. So just like a white noise sweep. And then I have a lot of saved MIDI risers. I find that the risers are very much so in the background, so it's fine if I reuse the same risers. So this one is one. And the way I have this done is, I believe I have a triad here, or an augmented chord. And if I look at the automation, I'm going to hit A, and then go to pitch bend. I have it from all the way down here to all the way up here. And if I look at the actual synth setting right here, and then I go to settings in the retro synth, this bend range is set to 1 octave. So basically this is going from 1 octave below, and then if it was at 0, it would go just the normal pitch, and then to 1 octave above. So that's how I do a lot of my risers. And then, like I said, that is saved in my loops library. So if I go to my loops, that would be one of my risers. So if I type in riser here, I have a bunch of risers saved that I can just drag and drop, and it makes my workflow a lot quicker. Same thing here. This is riser syncopated. You can see it right here. So I have this right here. And that's, we're obviously past the intro at this point, but here's another riser. This is just called default, but this is kind of before I made this a long time ago, before I knew you could adjust the bend range. So if you look at the animation or the automation of the pitch bend, I have it here, and then I just change the notes and then do it again. So it's the same idea, but just a little bit more hacky. And then I have the arpeggiator on there, which kind of just adds something to it. So anyway, that's kind of my risers, and you'll see these throughout the track. I have these throughout the drop, the intro, and anytime I want to kind of build into the next section. So that's my BRN section in a nutshell. One thing I forgot to do is the reverse crash. I literally just bounced out a crash cymbal, one from the Logic Pro Apple Loops library, and then just reversed it. So, and then bounced that out. So that's about it. So anyway, we've done the intro instruments section. We've done the BRN. I think now what we'll do is the vocals, and we're gonna come back to the vocals. So this song's called Inner Fire, and I'm gonna get rid of that. So Inner Fire, I was like, what are some kind of like fun background vocals that I could do that are on theme? So right here, this is me saying burning it down in the microphone, and then obviously my voice is adjusted. So, and you can look at this channel strip, which is just an absolute mess, but it is kind of fun. So, and let's see, did I pitch these down? Yeah, okay, so I pitched the original vocal down 7 octaves, or not 7 octaves, 7 semitones. And then I have a vocal transformer, which is that actually bringing the pitch up because I brought it down 7 octaves, so I'm bringing it up to make it sound a little bit more normal. I'm cutting off the lows and then boosting some EQ. I have a compressor, a de-esser, some more EQ, which is cutting off the lows again. And then Bit Crusher. I use Bit Crusher on so many of my tracks that I want to get fatter. And I've actually started using it on my mastering chain, which you'll see at the end of this video. But anyway, it gives a lot of boost, but it doesn't make it too loud. I use it mostly as a soft clipper. Here I'm actually using the down sampler, but mostly I don't use the down sampler. So we'll see that Bit Crusher a lot in this video. Ensemble kind of widens the sound and makes it more rich. And then yet another EQ. I don't even know why I have that. And then this high cut, I believe, is being automated. Maybe not. And then, let's see, pitch correction. I just messed around with this. I honestly don't really know if this is doing much. And then this is a little bit of reverb. My reverb, to be honest, is not greatly organized. It's not very efficient. I typically do reverb on each individual track, sometimes each grouping of tracks, rather than like doing it through busing, which if you want to do that, that's totally fine. But if that doesn't make any sense to you, don't worry. So anyway, that's the vocals for the background vocal. And then, let's see, I'll do the drums for the intro, and then we'll move on to the next section. So the drums, again, kind of messy, but during this intro part, it's literally just a clap. I have 2 kits doing it. I often find with drums, basically minus the kick, if you layer stuff, it typically sounds better. So I have this smash kit, and then I have the Paris House remix kit. And this is probably from either like a legacy pack or whatever, and then this is from the drum designer. So that's just where I'm getting my claps from. And anyway, that's kind of the intro. And the intro leads into verse 1. So we'll talk about that. So I'm going to start with the vocals here because this part right here, I just kind of chopped this first part of the verse, which you'll hear in a moment, up, and then faded it in. I think this is just gain. So yeah, this is just volume. There is some frequency automation as well. Both high cut and low cut, and that kind of just makes everything smoother. So basically, I find that the more very subtle transitions that you have from one section to the other, the more professional your track is going to sound. So anyway, that leads into the main vocals, which I guess I'll start here. So the main vocals, like other parts of my music production and sound design, I like to layer them. So this is me recording. I recorded in my closet. Fun fact. I got that in the fire and it's taking me higher. So that's kind of my normal take. So I have, I actually use a preset of my Pizza Party vocals that I just kind of made some tweaks with. So just typical EQ, compressor. I have an exciter on this one, which just kind of boosts the highs. The de-esser, which if you've ever edited vocals with S sounds, it sounds terrible unless you're really manipulating it. Then I have another EQ, which this area was probably too high. And then, like I said, on most of my tracks, I have this Bit Crusher. This is just acting as kind of a limiter. So I have this normal one. I got that in the fire and... But I also recorded it as like screaming into the microphone. So this is what that sounds like. I got that in the fire and it's taking me higher. So it's kind of like more like with an aggressive, my throat making a lot more noises. So together, I thought they sounded pretty cool. I got that in the fire and it's taking me higher. And you can notice that I've panned this one a little bit to the left and then this one a little bit to the right. And then I often always like to put a lower sounding voice underneath, which you don't really notice. You don't notice it's there until it's gone. So that's what this one sounds like. I got that in the fire and it's taking me higher. So this is pitched, looks down 3 semitones. So altogether, it sounds like this. I got that in the fire and it's taking me higher. Okay. I got that in. And then down here, as you heard, I have a bunch of ad-libs. And then once I went into like my mixing and mastering side of the project, which I'll show you at the end of this video, I made this a lot smoother, but just had some ad-libs in here as well. So anyway, that's the vocals. And with that, we had, let's go back to the drums. So the drums are, this is kind of like a fast-paced drum section. And I don't do this as much, but I layered these two kits. This is the same kits that I had clapping. As well, this is a kit that I made just with either samples that I got here or samples that I've made with the drum designer in Logic Pro. So this is my kit, which sounds okay. And then when I add these ones, I just felt like it sounded a little bit better. I think I only used the kick for mine. And then right here, this is a triangle bass. So it has some sub in it. When I'm doing stuff like this that isn't like the actual drop, sometimes I'll use a triangle sub bass instead of a regular sub bass. But for the drop, I almost always just use my normal sub bass, which is just a sine wave with maybe an octave sine wave on top of that. All right, so now if I close the drums, and by the way, this is just, I love the organization of the track stacks. It's just made my life so much better. Anyway, so we did that with the drums. We did that with the bass. I think we kind of already saw the BRN through the whole track, so I'm not going to bore you guys with that. And then these elements right here, the intro / post drop, this kind of stays the same. All right, so for the verse, I'm going to open this up. And let me just play what it sounds like. So you can kind of hear it all together. But the verse, if you can see, has a ton of layers. Sometimes I get like out of hand with the amount of layers, but like I said, I feel like layers make the track sound better and more professional. So let me just go through each layer very quickly. So that's that same kind of bit crushed, downsampled stock plugin that I found. And then I have a high triangle wave, so. And then I have this thick chords. I actually made this in my track Change Up that I released, 4 years ago. And I saved it as a preset. One thing that I recommend doing, anytime you make a sound that you like, just save it as a preset. You never know when you're going to use it again. So that sounds like this. And those are chords, if you can see. So I have, let's see, this is the E flat major, and then G major. So they're all major chords, and it's like that dun 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 chords. And then this right here is pretty quiet. But I did some other chords that track's probably hidden, and I just bounced it out, but maybe I felt like that sounded better. And then this is a side chain. To be honest, I have no idea. Oh, this is a side chain that I must have done this because there's no audio coming out of that. And then this instrument is one of the main instruments that I used in my track My Little Pony with Katie Killa. I think I added some extra distortion. Oh yeah, I added a lot of distortion. So I have some EQ, just some normal bit crusher, and then some fat effects. I love the fat effects plugin. So Bright Dirt is a preset that I just mixed about 20% to that. So this is what it would sound like without it. Just adds a little bit of extra fun. And then I have some EQ. Sometimes it adds some artificial bass, and then the highs might be too much. So I took those down, and then I boosted it up again with the bit crusher, and then some echo and reverb here. And this one is kind of the main attraction of this verse. So if I play this whole thing, this is kind of like the main beefy one. The rest are just layers. And then I think what I did here is I bounced some stuff out and then added them to a sampler. So I just have the quick sampler here. And then I did the same pattern. So that's kind of like a gritty sound, and I did the same thing here. That's kind of a wonkier sound that I did. But all together, and of course the organ synth that I showed you guys earlier. Just sounds like an organ. And then all that together with everything gives us the verse. In the fire and it's taking me higher. Okay, I got that in the fire and it's taking me. Yeah, I got that. So I chopped up the vocals as well. So the verse in the first part of this is very much so a like in music theory you call it simple time rather than compound time. The compound time kind of has like the triplet feel. So simple time, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Whereas the compound time kind of happens during the build up, which I would say starts around here. This is still simple time. And right here is when I kind of go to that triplety feel, like I got that in the fire and it's taking me higher. That in the fire and it's taking me higher. You know that my desire is the fuel to my fire. We in the fire. So the reason I did that is because I loved this kind of intro-y, like straightforward, aggressive attack. But I think when I started making this track, I might have started with the drop, and the drop was very much so in compound time with like the triplety feel. So I wanted a way to figure out how to combine those in the same song, and I'm very happy with the way it came out. But that transition happened kind of in between this verse and with the beginning of the build-up. And then, let's see, am I missing anything before we get to the drop? The vocals you can kind of hear are all chopped up. I have the ad-libs in here. If I open up this BRN, there's a lot of these same things that we went over earlier. And yeah, the drums kind of have a typical pattern. I used to literally just use like the drum sample files, but I've found that it's kind of fun to use the MIDI stuff here. Like if I open up this MIDI section, the reason I did this is because I've started recording drum patterns on my MIDI keyboard and then making edits there. It's kind of fun to like mess around with ideas rather than just like clicking and dragging, but I've done both ways many times, so there's no right or wrong answer there. All right, I think we're ready for the drop. So this drop has, well, let's go right. So we have, let's see. So we have 2 measures before it actually hits heavy. So I have this main bass. Let me kind of organize myself here. So let's go to drop bass. So right here. So this is called JB Smart Fat Bass. So this is the bass that I made for my Jingle Bells remix that I put out a couple years ago. And what this bass is made on is I have the EMF1, which is I get a lot of really fat sounds from by modulating mostly this FM dial and this wave dial. And then I have some effects on it. But what you'll see is if I hit B to get to Smart Control, what I do often is I attach this dial to my MIDI keyboard, and then I automate all this stuff. So let me show the automation for that. So basically all this is just modulating this one thing, but this one thing controls the the EFM1 modulator wave, the EFM1 pitch amount, the carrier intensity, and then one of these low cut filters. So if I bring them all up here, I think this looks right. And then this, so let's see. This. Like if I didn't have that, it would be just such a much more boring sound. So like if I go to like that's kind of what it would sound like. Obviously, it would be on time. I'm just playing it with the musical typing right now. But this right here, it's like right. So it gives it a lot more life. All right, so that is kind of like that's kind of how I started this whole thing. I started this. I was like, this would kind of be a fun little thing to then just have an absolutely explosively heavy bass come in. So anyway, there's no sub during that part, which I like. I believe. Yeah, I have a sub when the drum hits, so. Sorry. And that you can't really hear that for. Yeah, you can hear that for a little bit right there, if you're even listening on good headphones or a system that has a subwoofer. So I have that. And then I have a lot of other stuff that come in. So I'll go through that. This is kind of the most fun part of like a heavy bass song or a dubstep song or anything like that. So I have this sub top. And this is actually, these were the only two things that I started the song with, and then I got carried away. So like this is what it was initially when I started working on it. But that kind of sounded a little empty to me. So I added a lot of other stuff. So let's go through all of that. So Scream Bass, this is a track stack within a track stack. So I had, let's see, what did I do? Yeah, so Smart Control Bass. I took one of those basses that I had. This Smart Control bass house is from my track My Little Pony, but because I did the same type of thing, I believe, yeah, so I automated this stuff, and I don't think there's any automation here. Oh, no, I lied. There's tons of automation. But what I did is basically just, I messed with some of these parameters. So here's the retro synth. It's the FM synthesis. So if you mess with these things, and I've done tutorials on this, but if you mess with these things, you can get some crazy sounds. And then Bit Crusher, Fat Effects, that's pretty standard. And then this EQ cuts out the artifacts that are low. And then I fatten it up with a Bit Crusher, Echo, and Reverb. That's kind of a pretty standard channel strip setting. So anyway, so all of this comes in next. So I'll just play this here. And I have the layer because I'll show you each layer. But this is what it sounds like. I'll turn the drums off, sorry. So right here. So this kind of like back and forth automation of all this stuff kind of makes it fun. And the reason I have both of these is, one, layers often lead to good sounds, and two, I remember not being able to decide which one I liked better, and I was like, oh, let me just try them both. Hold on, let me close this. So this kind of has that like classic like the vowel manipulation bass, which I really liked, and then I think this one had more grit. Kind of had a little bit in there too, but together I thought it sounded good. So anyway, that is there. And then what I also did is when there was any open space, I kind of bounced out. So this bass right here, Crazy Ring Shift 3, is a bass that I made that I utilized the ring shifter with. It's probably hidden now, but I think I put 3 ring shifters on there and automated them differently. And I got these absolutely insane sounds. And what I do often, is I basically just record myself while the automation is recording, and it's recording to like a separate audio file of me just messing around for like minutes at a time with my MIDI controller. And then I'd say about 95% of it or more is absolute garbage, but that 5% you'll get some really cool sounds. So this is what this is from. So let's see, is this over anything? So I have. So anyway, so those kind of are fillers in the background. So let me play it all together. And I think that should be everything. So let me close that out and I'll go to this. So with all those sounds. So that's kind of the idea. Like as these ones are finishing, these come in a little bit early before these finish, but it's good because if they weren't there, it might seem a little empty. which it still sounded good, but I kind of like the way that these fill the area. The next thing I'm going to go through with this drop is this sound. So these are just an E flat major chord, I believe, and like a wicked fast arpeggio. Like I think I had to go to like the maybe 68th note, 64th notes. Nope, this is probably 128th, which they don't even show on the grid line. But just did a super fast arpeggio, and I kind of fattened it up and maybe put some other stuff underneath here. I kind of felt like it was a unique sound to put in and like different. I feel like a lot of times when I'm hearing EDM songs, it might be too repetitive. So I really try to go out of my way to make it not repetitive and add in new elements and just change things up when I can, just to kind of keep the listener either impressed or not bored. So, and then speaking of which, I go up on this little like bluesy pattern. So like, and then all the other instruments follow that. Goes back to the main theme. And then I do this kind of arpeggio, fat arpeggio chord again. And then it kind of does with the last blues thing kind of walked up, and then this one kind of walks back down. And then I have this drop. And notice the BRN is back at it. What I kind of learned a while ago is that you can kind of just build a little bit more tension, even if you don't notice it, by adding risers towards the end of your drop. It kind of goes back to my thing of if you're transitioning sections, like this is going to be the heavy drop and then there's going to be the post drop, it's good to have like risers and elements that kind of go throughout that. So I have this Gasly riser, this bass riser, and then this thing, the ones I showed you earlier. So those are all in the background. And then that leads us into the post. And you can hear the drum pattern changes as well. So the post drop goes like this. I have the triplety drums. I have the initial instrument that I started with. So this bass. But it's not that simple time. It's the compound time with the triplets. And then another riser. We in the fire. And that brings us into the intro pre-verse part again. So this part's very similar. I think this part might be exactly the same or very darn similar to the first 8 bars of the intro, maybe 16. The automation might be slightly different. Down, with all this stuff. And then I was like, oh, I could keep it the exact same, but like I just mentioned, I don't want to keep things exactly the same. I like switching things up when I can or when I think it might sound good. So what I did is I changed the drums. So I had these drums over here. Nope, that's the drop, sorry. So like this is kind of like a breakbeat drum style or whatever it's called. And then this one, I did like a traditional dubstep drums. Not there, right here. It's taking me higher, okay. Well, I got that in the fire, and it's taking me, yeah, I got that in the fire. And as I changed from like the verse part of this section to the build-up part, I went back to those breakbeat drum pattern, and that was with this little transition. And that is pretty similar. Some of the ad-libs might be different. And then that brings us to drop 2. So drop 2 is, or at least the first half of it is very different than drop 1. I kind of made a separate drop while working on this project, and it could have been a different song, but I'm like, oh, I bet you I could incorporate this. This is kind of more of like a rhythmy drop. And the way I did that, let's see, where's drop 2? I'm going to close all these, close this, or I should say collapse. I'm not closing anything. Background drop 2. So background drop 2 even has its own different thing. So this is the background for it, which is just like, this is just like a wobbly little screech. And then that's that organ synth that I've been using. And then let's go to, yeah, so drop 2 is down here. So notice I had all these instruments for drop 1, and then drop 2 is even more layers and more fun. So when I go here, I actually found a bunch of samples in the Apple Loops library that were like gun related. So I took them and I manipulated some and then did not manipulate others. So that's just like a gun hand click. So I did that. And then let's see what I do with this one. This one's totally manipulated. I think let's see. Yeah, I transposed something 36 semitones up. So that's going to completely change the sound. And then I did all sorts of EQing, distortion, stuff like that. And then I did another one. Yeah, so all together, it kind of gives you this like nice percussion sound. And that's kind of it. This is muted. This doesn't start yet. So I think that's basically all we have here. And then I have a vocal sample. I'm saying firecracker. And then back to that crazy ring shift bass that I mentioned earlier. These are just some of the audio chunks that I chopped up. And we are in that compound time setting here rather than the simple time. So all of that leads in to the fat part. Fire! So let's unpack this. So this right here is a bounced out FM1, so the E FM1. So that was just kind of a fat thing that I probably bounced out and chopped up. And then I have that gun sound, this gun sound, and then another gun sound. Let's play this other gun sound. So it's kind of just noise, but it adds a little bit of thickness. Might be unnecessary, but thought it sounded good. And then this has some more automation. So this is one of my presets that I did the same thing. I automate a bunch of stuff to the macro of the smart control. And then this is some of the recorded MIDI. Sometimes I'll actually change the BPM and record the MIDI so I have a bit more control, and then I'll speed it back up to the actual project tempo. In this case, it's 150. And then I think this is another one, or maybe this one didn't have any automation. Yeah, this one didn't have any automation. Let's see what that sounds like. So it's just kind of like a fatty song, or sound, I should say, from the EMF1. And then I have this Jingle Bells-y bass. Oh, and I definitely have a ring shifter on there. Yep, so I have a ring shifter on here, which is giving this kind of like almost watery sound, if that makes any sense. So that's without the ring shifter. Oh, and that ring shifter is automated. That's fun. And then I have this, which is just, it looks like it's that crazy ring shift bass. Yep, look, I have 3 ring shifters here. And I have some stuff automated. And it looks like based on these shapes, I just copied the automation and it just applied to whatever was being controlled here. So here I have some of the stuff that's being automated here. And this sounds kind of like not that good, but as a layer, that's not really a huge part of the sound. It's a good way to add a little bit of thickness and other fun stuff to the sound. And then the sub bass top, which, let's see what that is. Yep, that's just that same one from earlier. And all together, if I do this, this is what it sounds like. And then with the sub on, then this is one of those sounds. And then I have at the end of that, this right here is a slowdown. So it's kind of like if you had an old record player And then it was like, it took some time to stop. So it's like, so sometimes I use that with a lot of my basses. So I get this. And then I brought that same like bluesy bass walk up to this part of the drop 2 to have that in common. You don't want it to be like two completely different stuff. So there's obviously a lot of differences, but there are some similarities. And then brought my favorite arpeggio here. And then another crazy ring shift. And then another burn it. And I have that riser, I have an ad-lib, and then I go back in and I basically copied parts from the first drop, so drop 2B, or the second part of drop 2. Okay. And then I didn't do the bluesy part for this second part of like the first theme from drop 1. I had this riser coming up, like over. So that last one right here is just by itself with that main drop theme. So part of the reason why I like that main theme is because the interval is a major third, and usually, sometimes, major songs are like thought of as like happy or I don't know. But because I'm using that Middle Eastern type scale, so let's see, it's kind of evil. So I have this, which is like this very innocent little major third, and then adding this note right here makes it a lot more diabolical. So anyway, that's kind of the track breakdown. I am going to just briefly show you the mix and master. So one thing that I'd recommend doing for the mix and master, if you're going to do it like this, now professionals or people that have plenty of money would probably just get this actually mixed perfectly, and then someone else would go and master it who actually has like the technical skills and the proper equipment and studio and all that stuff. Most amateur producers do not have that available to them. So what I do is I master everything myself. I have this kick drum as a side chain, and all these little groups here. I do have a side chain compressor. So this compressor will be linked to this track right here. So like one mistake I made when side shading all my stuff is doing too much, and I found that would kind of mess up the sound. So I usually just reduce about anywhere from 2 to 3 decibels. It's not a huge difference, but it just allows that kick drum, or if you're going to do the snare drum as well, to pop through the mix a little bit more. So anyway, once you've done all that and the mix is in a good spot, what I recommend doing, as you can see, this track's called Risers and Boomers. I had no idea what I was going to call this track beforehand. I actually thought that this track was going to be me just making a bunch of risers and boomers that I could use in other tracks, but then this turned into a track, which is great. So anyway, I then used the project alternative feature. So what I do is do a new project alternative. The reason is because the way I master is very unconventional, and I completely do it all by myself with Logic Pro stock plugins. So sometimes I'll like get into a master and I'll be basically putting a mastering chain on and then like mixing the track again, which you'll see, and then I mess things up. So I always want the ability to go back to the pre-master version just so I have this in the way that I want. So I always would recommend doing a new alternate before you master. So anyway, this is that file. And let's see, I don't think I did anything, but I will hit save because nothing crazy happened. So now it's opening up the mastered version. And I'm not going to show you the entire thing. That's a video for another day. So here's the mastered version. And if you notice, I have so many more tracks. Part of my hacky master thing is to put on my mastering chain. So let me just show you what that is real quick. So I have a directional mixer, which gets all the lows below 200 hertz just in mono. Because sometimes if your bass is in a stereo, then different phase cancellation stuff can make it sound not so great. So I like to have my bass in mono below 200 hertz. And then I just extend the stereo 1.08. So it's not a ton, but it just makes the track a tiny bit wider. And then what I do is I do a match EQ with pink noise. So you can use the test oscillator to generate pink noise, but I actually have bounced that out. If you look at my stuff, pink noise, it's the first thing that here. So I'll drag this into my track, and then I'll use the match EQ. I'm not going to go over how to do that now. I'm sure there are tutorials on YouTube where you can find that. Then I use a multipressor, and I've been less and less into the multipressor as much. I don't want to squash it too much here. I don't want to change the sound. Basically what I do is I just compress each band a little bit, and I try to make sure that the sound isn't changed. So if I compress something a little bit and it's down, then I'll make that up with gain for all this stuff. And in this case, it looks like I used 2.5. It looks like it was probably compressed about 2.5, and then I made that up with 2.5 decibels of gain. And then this gain helps me get into the adaptive limiter, which this is the main thing that I use for getting the track loud enough to get it as loud as other things. If you listen to dubstep, you'll know that it is one of the loudest genres out there. So it's very difficult to get a clean sounding, loud enough mix. So I actually recently have been utilizing the adaptive limiter and then the bit crusher acting as a soft clipper. So if you notice this, I'm taking what's all the way up to as loud as it goes, and then I am making it even louder with this bit crusher. So I'm adding 2 decibels. I've found that it still sounds clean enough if I'm editing it properly. And it's a little bit easier to get to that loudness. I feel like I'm not sacrificing as much, but I'm sure if you're an actual audio engineer, you're like, this is absolute madness. And you're absolutely right. This is not the conventional way that they would teach you how to master a real track, but this works for me. And I've been doing this for all my tracks for, the last 2 years. And yeah, so that's been fun. And then I just do minus 0.1. I bounce my tracks out at minus 1 or 0.1 of a decibel of gain. Just honestly, because Logic Pro gets mad at me. It makes a red light if I didn't have it. So if I did this right here. So actually, and you can see that I've frozen a lot of my tracks. It just helps the processor. So if I play a track. It gets mad at me. So I don't know why it used to not do that, but since then I've just been having my track set at negative 0.1. With my adaptive limiter, before I did this whole bit crushing hack, I had this at negative 0.1. And then, let's see. So then I just have an EQ. I do nothing here. This just helps me look at the waveform. What's helped me, especially when I started, is comparing what the shape of my waveform looked like relative to other tracks. Like, are my highs too low? Are my highs too high? Is my bass too low? Is my bass too high? So if I go to the drop part, I like to have my sub bass basically reaching 10 here. So whatever that sub bass is. And it's typically, I usually have it a little bit less. I feel like if I'm really trying to push that sub bass to make sure that it's at 10, then I am either distorting other parts. So it's kind of a good compromise to have it a slightly below 10. But if you don't like it that way, you can obviously do stuff differently. I just found that that's about where other tracks are when I drag them into Logic and use this visual equalizer to see where it is. And then I look at the multimeter. So this is kind of a fun visual. This kind of shows not only where you are, so this kind of has a similar thing to the EQ. So shows where your frequencies are, and then this shows kind of how wide your track is. So if everything's in the middle, that means you don't have a ton of stereo imaging going on. So I like to have that. when those other instruments come out, the track obviously gets a lot wider. And then the last thing about mastering is I learned this trick. I think I was watching like an Instagram video. But for some songs, and I don't do this for every song, but if there's a song that like you really want that drop to hit, what I'll do is I'll automate the master volume, and I will, as this buildup is happening, slowly negative 1.5, and then right as that main drop is going to hit, I bring it back to 0, so it kind of gives that almost like a fake effect of your drop even hitting harder than it normally would if this wasn't here. I've been doing this for a while now. Sometimes I go down to -2, but I felt that was too much. Actually, on Adrenaline Rush, the third track of this EP, I only did to -1. It just depends on the track, but sometimes it works, sometimes you don't need it. So anyway, that's the mastering thing. And then when I'm mastering, what I'll do is I'll get it to that main volume, and almost always, and I'm saying almost always because if you were like a good mastering engineer, unlike me, then you might be able to master it in a way where you don't have to adjust the level of the tracks or make other versions of the tracks just to make everything fit right. But almost always I have to make lots of duplicates of tracks, or at least adjust the levels of tracks or automate the levels of tracks, just because it's just such a long and tedious process. I don't love mastering. That's probably because I'm not that good at it, but it's way cheaper to do it yourself than to hire someone. I mean, depending on who you're hiring to master your track, you could be paying hundreds, if not thousands or more of dollars. So anyway, this is what's worked for me, and I am hoping to be releasing a little production course where I show every single thing on making a track, but that has been in the back burner for a while, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, that's kind of how I made my track, Inner Fire. The EP is out now. I hope that you check out all the songs. There's 4 tracks on it. Inner Fire is the first track, then there's a bass house track called Heartbeat, a drum and bass track called Adrenaline Rush, and then the title track is another dubstep track called Go Away. So yeah, if you like this video or if it helped you out, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or video suggestions, be sure to leave a comment. If you want to see more videos like this, or check out my other DJ or music producer content, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thanks a lot.